Hello. So in this lecture, we will talk about the health impacts of bioaerosols. So bioaerosols and their exposure pathways are illustrated in this figure. So this is our human being, and this human being is now affected by various bioaerosols. These could be pollens and spores, which can range from 5 micrometer to 300 micrometers. These can be bacteria, which can range from 0.25 micrometers to 60 micrometers. And these bioaerosols can also include the virus, which can be even less than 0.2 micrometers. There are different modes of infection for this. One infection pathway could be through inhalation. These could be non-infectious or respiratory diseases can be caused. The second pathway mode is indirect contact. This could be sneezing or coughing. There could be direct skin contact also in the mode, which may include biting and also touching. And this may cause the infectious disease also. Finally, the ingestion could also occur through hand. So we touch the infected agent or the bioaerosol, and we consume it. So ingest it. Then there are several health impacts. Of course, we know a lot of health impacts now due to exposure from especially viruses. So when the person is taking up these bioaerosols, there can be Pontiac fever and asthma, which could be basically now we are looking at the infection in the lungs. There can be toxic alveolitis and bronchitis. So there are major groups of diseases which are associated with the bioaerosol exposure. We can term them as infectious disease, non-infectious disease. We can also put them as respiratory disease and cancer. The infectious disease can occur due to all possibilities. They can be caused from viruses, from bacteria, and from fungi, protozoa and helminths. So a lot of biological agents can cause such infectious disease. Here some microorganisms that are associated with an airborne route of exposure that will result in adverse human health effects are listed. These organisms could be Aspergillus fumigatus, which are the sources of which are the mold contaminated building and compost. So this is quite common. We can have molds in the building in the humid areas, and we may also have compost. The next is Aspergillus versicolor, which is also produced in mold contaminated building, similar to the Aspergillus fumigatus. The next is Bacillus anthracis. It could be produced in the lab, or it can also be sourced from the animal handlers, people who deal with animals, and also veterinarians, because veterinarians also deal with animals. Then we have Francisella tularensis, which is again can be lab based, and naturally it can be emitted from the infected rodents. The next is Legionella pneumophila, the sources of which are the aerosols from the water spray. Then Mycobacterium tuberculosis is actually transferred from person to person. The Penicillium species, similar to Aspergillus fumigatus and Aspergillus versicolor, can be found in mold contaminated buildings. Likewise, Stachybotrys chartarum and Trichoderma species are also emitted from mold contaminated buildings. So there are a lot of organisms actually that are emitted from the mold contaminated buildings, and thus their production and existence in the indoor environment is directly related to the condition of the building. Then variola virus and Yersinia pestis are again could be lab based microbes or bioorganisms. Yersinia pestis can also be emitted or sourced from the infected fleas. Bacteria that can cause infectious disease include Streptococcus pneumoniae, basically causes pneumonia. Mycobacteria tuberculosis causes TB. Coxiella burnetii, fever. Legionella bacteria causes Legionnaire's disease and the Pontiac fever. The transfer of bacilli occurs through the inhalation of the aerolized bacilli. The transmission of, for example, anthrax could occur due to the inhalation of the spores of Bacillus anthracis. So, inhalation becomes a pathway. Legionella often becomes airborne as a result of active aerolizing. It may inhabit various water environments that may include man-made water systems. It may also occur often in biofilms, in the cooling towers and in the air conditioning systems. So it is associated with water, let us say. And whenever this water somehow is aerolized or is in the form of a spray, this becomes airborne. Legionella becomes airborne, and a person may be exposed to it and may become affected by it. Now, anthrax, as just said, the transmission occurs due to the inhalation of the spores of Bacillus anthracis. Outbreaks are often linked to man-made activities, which are these are spread through intentionally. For example, intentionally contaminated mail, The other places it can occur, anthrax outbreak could occur, would be in some probably occupational settings. Now, occupants of buildings introduce gram-positive bacteria such as Staphylococcus, skin scales and viruses. Now, these skin scales are sort of a food source for the house dust mites. So, it is easy to find house dust mites where there are people if the house is not like super clean, because if human is there, skin scales will be there. Skin scales will be there, the house dust might have the food. These dust mites can cause rhinitis, allergic asthma, atopic dermatitis, conjunctivitis, and the hypersensitivity disease. The dust mite actually are a problem because the dust mite allergen exposure has been shown to be associated with the development of asthma even in the childhood. So, if children are somehow exposed to these allergens from the dust mites, then they will develop health issues. So, we need to take care to minimize the occurrence or the presence of the dust mites. The gram-negative bacteria, which are often found in the humidifiers in HVAC systems, can also contain the endotoxins. These are basically liposaccharides of the gram-negative bacterial cell wall. They are from the bacterial cell wall of the gram-negative bacteria. Endotoxins are potent pyrogens. They are capable of causing fever in very low concentrations. Additionally, the high exposure to endotoxin is often associated with nausea and diarrhea. So, even if it's low concentration, they may cause fever. If they are in high concentration, they may cause diarrhea or nausea. So, endotoxins are basically harmful in all concentrations. The exposure to endotoxin can be shown to be associated with fever, chills, muscle aches, malaise, and chest symptoms. So, there are a number of health effects possible from the exposure to endotoxins. Next are the respiratory diseases. So, in general, airborne fungi are reported to be an important cause of respiratory complaints. It is especially in the atopic individuals. Atopy is basically the genetic predisposition of an individual to produce high quantities of immunoglobulin. These are the proteins that the immune system makes to protect the body from the bacteria, viruses, and allergens, which can be produced from the environment. For example, pollens, house dust mites, molds, pet dander, food stuff, and others. The airborne fungi that can cause such kind of respiratory infections and also the allergic reactions. These fungi include penicillium, Aspergillus, Acremonium, Rhizomyces, Mucor, and Cladosporium. Chronic asthmatics can be caused by Aspergillus fumigatus, by Bipolaris hawaiensis, or Vangellar dermatitis. Organisms such as Coccidioides, Histoplasma, Blastomyces can be carried by bats and birds and are then linked to the exposure to windborne or animal-borne contamination. Additionally, the volatile products of fungal metabolism are capable of inducing sensory irritation to the eyes and also the upper respiratory tract. Mycotoxins are generally absorbed by the intestinal lining, the airways, and also the skin. So these mycotoxins can be sort of taken into the body, or they exist in the body in a lot of places. They can be the airways, where so we are breathing the air, or skin, and they are also sort of arriving in the intestines, so probably due to the ingestion pathway also. Aspergillus, Fusarium, and Stachybotrys can act as aeroallergens, and these can produce these mycotoxins. Some of the adverse effects include preterm births and even late abortion in the farm women, where they may have become exposed to these mycotoxins. We already know some cases of the harmful impacts of exposure to viruses. Viruses are often readily transmitted by the airborne route, and such viruses include the severe acute respiratory syndrome, the SARS virus, then the COVID-19 we already know about. Viruses can also be the enteric viruses, which are of intestinal origin, and they are produced at places such as sewage treatment facilities. Then we can have the respiratory syncytial virus, RSV. We can have the hantavirus, which is caused from the feces of rodents. We can have the varicella zoster virus. The other commonly known viruses are measles, mumps, and rubella viruses. As we know, the SARS is caused by the novel coronavirus. This coronavirus is actually very contagious, so very easily it is transmitted from one person to another. As in COVID-19 we have seen, it can travel or it can spread through hand action if we touch the infected place and somehow ingest it, and very possibly through the air transmission. So if an infected person is in a room and is sort of shedding the virus, because the person is infected and the body wants to shed the virus out, this shedded virus is then taken up, basically inhaled by another person, and since it was highly contagious, the other person also got infected. with the result being many people got infected. So this type of virus was highly contagious. It was then responsible for respiratory infection and respiratory infection of people and leading to significant morbidity and mortality. So a lot of people got sick, and of course the death rate was also high. The SARS may basically cause very severe sort of pneumonia. Then we have the cancer. So we have some biological occupational carcinogens, and these are basically our mycotoxins. For example, aflatoxin from the Aspergillus flavus is highly dangerous and capable of causing the liver cancer. The ochratoxin is a possible human carcinogen. Here there are some diseases listed that are transferred from person to person by the inhaled airborne particles. We have the disease here, the microbial agent, and the taxon. We have the chicken pox first, very common, which can be passed through the agent varicella zoster virus. So it is basically a virus. Then we have the common cold, where the agent is rhinovirus. So taxon is virus. Then we can have the gastroenteritis diseases caused by the norovirus. So again it's a virus. Then we have influenza, which is caused by the microbial agent, or the agent for transmission is the influenza virus A. So again the agent is a virus. Then we have Legionnaires disease transmitted by the agent Legionella pneumophila, and this is a bacteria. Then we have measles, which is transmitted through the measles virus. So taxon is a virus. The next is meningitis, which is transmitted by Neisseria spp, and this is a bacteria. Then we have mumps. Mumps are basically transmitted through the mumps virus, and this is a virus. Then we have pneumonia disease, which is caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae, and this is a bacteria. Then we have the pulmonary disease, which is transmitted through the non-tuberculosis mycobacteria. So bacteria. Then we have the severe acute respiratory syndrome SARS, which is basically transmitted through the SARS coronavirus. So the taxon is virus. The next is smallpox, transmitted through the variola major or variola minor, and the taxon is the virus. Then we have staphylococcal infection, transmitted through the agent Staphylococcus aureus, and this is the bacteria. Then we have tuberculosis, which is transmitted through the agent Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and this is a bacteria. Finally, we have the whooping cough, which is transmitted by Bordetella pertussis, and it's a bacteria. So in this table, most of the diseases are caused by the transmission of virus or the bacteria, and lists many of the common diseases: chicken pox, cold, common cold, influenza, and diseases that we know about like measles, meningitis, mumps, pneumonia. SARS, smallpox, tuberculosis. The potential health hazard caused by the bioaerosols eventually depends on the pathogenicity of the specific microorganism that is in the question. Also, the potential health hazard depends on other factors such as the environmental conditions, because these environmental conditions may well determine if the microbe will survive in the air or not. So first, how pathogenic is the microorganisms, and second, are the environmental conditions suitable for its survival, or are they not suitable for its survival, in which case the organism will not survive and we may not be at a health risk. Now we have some non-infectious diseases. So bioaerosols are also associated with non-infectious diseases such as hypersensitivity, then allergies, and asthma. So bioaerosols are associated with infectious disease as well as the non-infectious disease. The genera of fungi. So now we will look at some species specific diseases. The genera of fungi which may cause diseases in human beings includes Cladosporium, Alternaria, Penicillium, and Aspergillus. Alternaria sp, Cladosporium sp, and Penicillium sp actually have been associated with the diseases such as asthma and rhinitis. The Penicillium species, which can have spores of the diameter range 2 to 3 micrometer, has been responsible for also several hypersensitivity pneumonitis epidemics. Next, the organisms which may produce VOCs may also be contributing to a health effect. So one is the direct influence of the organism. Now we have the indirect influence of the organisms, in that these organisms are producing volatile organic compounds, and these may cause headache to people, eye and throat irritation, nausea, dizziness, and fatigue in people who are occupying these contaminated indoors. So it is quite possible that these things may be happening when we have organisms which are producing VOCs in the indoor environment. So if we were to summarize now, the exposure to bioaerosols can actually cause a number of infectious and non-infectious diseases, and there can be many cases of such disease, and these diseases could be due to bacteria or fungi or virus, or actually also endotoxins. So we have also looked at an overview of the such diseases in this lecture.